All right, I hope you enjoyed your break. One of the things that we're going to talk about in this last half is some of the downsides of trying to do something about pornography. Uh, some people would say that it's an exhilarating thing and helpful in so many ways, and other people see it as very dangerous. That somebody's going to get really hurt if we don't do something about it. There's some problems, though, with trying to do anything legally in our country regarding pornography. The first thing is to actually prove legal obscenity. Here are three things that must be proven in a court of law by lawyers who are arguing both sides of the issue. The first is the average person would find the work as a whole to appeal to prurient or lustful interest. Well, you start off the first few words, the average person. Who is that? Is that Hugh Hefner? Is that Randy Harris? Uh, there's several definitions of what could be the average person, but it's really difficult in court to figure out who that is. The second thing is the work is patently offensive by state or federal law. So there's some states that do not prosecute it, and consequently, the federal prosecutors don't pick it up either. So that becomes an issue and a problem unless the states have some pretty significant laws. But you have to get one, two, and then look at three. The work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Well, there are some pornographers who have actually said, we're going to put someone in this clip who looks like a professor or looks like a scientist, and they're going to talk about how someone should have sex here or there, which makes it a scientific movie, not something that's cheap and just sheer pornography. Or they say this is artwork, and they make them art students to get around this. But the bottom line is, you see that it's really difficult to prove all three of those if you start worrying and quibbling about any of the words in those three things. But they all three have to happen. There are two areas that pornography is prosecuted. First of all, child porn, because you know that there is a victim. There's an identified victim that's the innocent party that does not want to be involved in this. And sure enough, the police will go after folks who do this. The other one is one you may not have heard about. It's called snuff porn, in which someone is basically raped and then killed as a part of that. And they, of course, are not knowing that that's going to happen to them, but there are people who pay a whole lot of money to watch someone being killed as they're being raped in pornography. And obviously, that's a horrible thing, but that's a part of our world and in places called the dark web. One of the questions I'm always asked is, why is it so pervasive? How can you get 12 to 14 billion dollars generated through pornography? Well, the first thing is accessibility. No human contact is needed to see pornography, to view it. Uh, it's so easy to get to with smartphones and the world of technology that you live in. The second thing is the profits have not risen as much dramatically because there's so much free pornography online. So it is fairly affordable compared to maybe some of the other vices folks have. And even if they have some free, they might pay for a little bit and get other viewings free. And last of all, high levels of anonymity. Uh, it's really easy to hold this as a secret. There are a lot of men who are struggling with porn addictions that you would never know and never think about. Think back to the first few slides. 1 in 6 pastors are addicted to pornography and viewing pornography pretty consistently. Uh, in my work with churches, consulting with them, I've actually had youth ministers who were downloading thousands and thousands of pictures of porn on their church computer in their church offices, and made the mistake of calling one of the IT guys in their office complex to say, my computer's slowing down really slowly. And the tech gets in there, starts to see all this pornography, and of course the youth minister gets fired. I know one church that had that happen, the next search process, they asked every candidate, do you have any problems or struggles with pornography? Everybody told them no. They hired one of the guys. The second youth minister they hired also had an addiction to pornography. He didn't put it on his church computer. He had it on his home computer. And his wife found out about it. And obviously that caused some significant problems for them. So those are three reasons why it's really, really pervasive in our society and our culture. I just show you this to show you the levels of addiction. We tend to think about addictions and talk about cocaine users, heroin users who are the worst of the worst, and that brings up at about somewhere around 4 million people. Well, look at what they would consider to be the primary users of porn. And the numbers there are staggering in comparison to drug use. And as you know, drugs will eventually leave your system, but the memories of pornography and the impact of pornography continue on and on many times. Dr. Donald Hilton talked about some of the hormonal things that are going on when people view pornography. There are chemicals that trigger sexual arousal and orgasm are the same ones that cause addictions to alcohol, heroin, meth, and the various things. They go on the same routes and use the same chemicals that create that addiction. Eventually, as with any addiction, you get desensitized to things. Famous court case many years ago, the Rodney King beating, in which he was beaten pretty severely by a group of cops out in LA. This is a picture of that incident. If you've seen the video of this, it's horrifying when you watch it for the first time. The lawyers that were defending the cops in what they did something extremely interesting, and it's very telling about how you get desensitized to pornography across time. In the court case, they played the tape the first time, and they could see the jurors actually cringe and flinch as they watched this beating that Rodney King had. Eventually, throughout the trial, which lasted several months, they played this same clip over 160 times, and the jurors quit flinching. And eventually, the jurors made their deliberations, and I'm sure there were several factors, but one of the factors was they were not shocked by it anymore because they had seen that same clip 160 times. And it was a strategic move by the defense attorneys to make sure that those jurors did not feel anything. And pornography has that same impact many times if you see hundreds and hundreds of hours of pornography. Hilton went on to talk about the brain is like a forest where trails are worn down by hikers who walk along the same path. If you've ever been up in Colorado working down a trail when you're backpacking, you know that there's this little worn trail that people step on over and over and over again, and that's where you go, and that's where everybody who follows you goes. Well, your brain's the same way. When you think about porn and see porn, there's a trail in your brain that gets paved. It tends to make you think sexually about people, sexually about situations that other people would not even consider because the pathway is already paved. Now, some of the other interesting things about increased usage of pornography and just hours and hours and hours of it is an increasing number of high school students up to 40-year-old men are finding they have erectile dysfunction. And if this doesn't scare you, nothing will, guys. This is a problem, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem across time. There are guys that I know who got married during college who have confessed that they're having a hard time actually getting turned on by their own wife who's in the bed with them because a pornography habit they started back in junior high has made it where they're struggling with getting turned on. Some have said that this generation has sexual anorexia, a decreased appetite for authentic human sexual activity. You may not know, but the most requested thing on the porn sites are students having sex with much older teachers, adults. Does that have any impact on our world and on our culture? Well, let's take a look. 2014, 781 cases were reported nationwide. Now, you and I know there were a whole lot more cases than that. Those are just the ones that were reported. Number one state for inappropriate teacher-student relationships. Let you take a guess. Texas. Wow. That's not the one we wanted to be number one in. As you look to some more recent stats, in 2017, there were 845 cases reported nationally. Of that number, 224 were reported in Texas. The second most were in Pennsylvania at a mere 45. And if you're watching the news, and some of you folks who are going into public education, the state of Texas has put in more stringent laws and much harsher penalties for teachers that step across that line. Top 10 most popular films bought or rented in 2017 in the porn world. 88% of them contain physical violence. 49% contain that verbal aggression. And 95% of the women who were being abused physically or verbally were neutral to the abuse or responded with pleasure to the abuse, which should be shocking to the women in this room. That's what these boys are being trained who watch pornography over and over and over again. They think you are thinking that same way. So how do we help our kids? A few steps that we can take right off the bat. First of all, anticipate the exposure of pornography. It is not if they're going to be exposed to pornography someday. The question is when. There's too many pop-ups. There are too many things that have address sites that would be innocent looking that pornographers have bought up and have gotten kids to jump into by accident in this world and realm. So you need to just anticipate it's going to happen. Secondly, you need to warn your child or students before they have that moment in time. Every single one of our kids are going to see some type of pornography before they're 12, 13, 14 years old. So you're going to want to have those conversations. It may be part of that conversation about sex with your kids along the way, and tell them, hey, there's a huge danger here. Talk about the lies of pornography, that there's some themes that are dangerous and are not real with pornography, that are something that they need to be watching out for. And also just tell them about the power of pornography, maybe the power of pornography in your own life. I can distinctly remember seeing pornography at my best friend's house when I was about 11 years old, and I can still describe her body in detail. I still see it when I think back to that time, and it's been a long time since I've been 11 years old, but it is still powerful and still is a memory that I have to deal with and struggle against, because it still calls to me this many years later. Third thing is just filter and be watchful for exposure. Do the best you can with the filters and the things that are there and available in technology, but realize that you will not ever be able to filter out every single thing. And then last of all, you as a parent or you as a mentor don't need to be involved in pornography. It may be your kid looking at places where you have been, that they get their first exposure. The best way to help them understand it is you be accountable for what you watch, and also help them learn how to be accountable as well. So